In today's show, we're creeping closer to the NBA draft. We'll check in on the latest mock drafts. Plus, somehow NBA free agency is already here. What's that mean for the Trailblazers? Let's get into it. Welcome to Locked On Blazers.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? Past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we are creeping closer to the NBA draft. It's almost here. We are almost within a week of the NBA draft. You're listening to Tuesday, June 18th show. I appreciate you listening. We will talk latest mock drafts and some thoughts on it's a sort of general lack of consensus, and that still remains. And also, what is Atlanta going to do at 1 and how that might shake out the rest of the draft. Then somehow NBA free agency is here. The league has changed the rules slightly about the timing of certain aspects of NBA free agency, and because the Boston Celtics finished out the NBA season by beating the Dallas Mavericks in Game 5, and that bad boy's finished as I'm recording this, NBA free agency teams are allowed to negotiate with their own free agents. I have some thoughts on that. And I also think it has actual repercussions for the Trailblazers. There'll be real world things to track for the Trailblazers. It certainly won't be signing free agents, but I think there's actual legitimate impact with free agency for where the Blazers are going to be at this summer. Let's get into the mock draft stuff first. I think in general, mock drafts are not predictive or meant to be so. I've talked about here on the program before how ESPN specifically, their mock draft has been pretty predictive for the Blazers over the last 2 seasons. It's been nails. They've been on it. ESPN last year even got 9 out of the first 10 picks correct. I would say that service specifically is more predictive, right? It's more like a projection of where players are going to go based on intel. But I think for the most part, what you see with mock drafts this time of year, and they're a mock, that word means something, but they are a mixture of intel from reporters who are plugged in, which is why I don't share anyone who makes a mock draft. In previous iterations, previous roles that I've had, people have asked me to make mocks, and it's I don't I'm guessing, right? My input is not valuable, but I do trust people who do this full time or do and I try to share those with you, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. But even those, even people who do it all the time, they're do it as their career job, right? And do the scouting stuff as their career job. It's a lot of the mock draft exercise is a prediction of both intel and what you think the team should do. And intel can range from I've heard they want to draft Alex Sarr to the point to hey, at 7 they've got a couple different options, and I know Dalton Connect worked out for the Trailblazers. That type of thing. Intel can vary a lot of different ways, and it's sometimes hard to parse those things. But before I present these, I don't mean them to be predictive. I don't think these are necessarily here's who the Blazers are going to predict. I think it's more of an exercise of, if it shook out like this, what would you think, and why would the Blazers maybe go this route? So I'm going to share 2 mocks with you with sort of that in mind. These are not meant to be prognostications of what will happen next week. They are meant to be a look at what potentially could happen based on a million other factors. And they are educated dart throws, but admittedly, they are often dart throws. Certainly, I try not to share people that I think are just actively throwing darts. Used to play darts a bunch in when I was a little bit younger, and occasionally we would get bored and start throwing darts underhand. So I try not to bring the underhand darts to you. These are more of these are the smart steel tip darts. The first is from the Ringer, from Kevin O'Connor, and he did a 2-round mock in which the Blazers at 7 are taking Donovan Clingan, and at 14 are taking Tijan Salah. We'll go with the second round guys in a moment. Clingan has some buzz to be the number 1 overall pick Like Klingon falling out of the top 5 and all the way down to 7 is really tricky. There's some reporting from Raphael Barlow of Locked In NBA Big Board that like there is speculation that Klingon could go as high as 1 and conceivably 2, but like the Hawks are in position that they might consider Klingon at 1. That's really something. I like Donovan Klingon as a prospect. Like I think he's going to be a good defensive player in the league. I've said a million times on the show, and I'll say it again here. I'm a little confused about what he does on offense. He's a good passer and a good, pretty, I think he can be okay in the short roll, but it's like his own touch and his own range. It's like, what does he do? But like a guy who can just like a rim running big who can be a good defensive player is probably a long-term pro. I'm not sure what his high level upside is. I'm not sure I would be excited about picking him at 1, but if he's at 7 for the Blazers, even with DeAndre Ayton in tow, fine. It's fine with me. I think that's a totally fine pick. I'm not, no parade, but I think he's like a total, I have faith in him being an NBA player. At 14, Salah is like, I'm not sure he'll be there. There's some rumors that he could be gone at 8 to the Spurs, but he's a guy who I've enjoyed as just an upside swing. He's, a giant frame, high motor forward. He's like a quintessential Blazers pick, Joe Cronin pick. Maybe he never becomes a shooter. Maybe he never has any on-ball juice whatsoever, and he's always just a role player. I think that's a pretty reasonable guess for his outcome, right? Because he's young. Obviously, he could get a lot better and things change. But it's like his shooting is mostly theoretical. He shot okay this season, but he's mostly been a bad shooter in his pro career. He's a bit of a late bloomer. He's a guy who plays really hard and is built like a giant NBA forward. And I think you see someone like, okay, well, you don't have to worry about his motor, and he's really big, and he's interested in playing defense, and if we can sharpen some of his offensive skills, that's a valuable forward in the league. I still think his floor is like not NBA player. I want to be clear about Salam, but his ceiling, I'm not sure I see like I think at one point I may have called him Giannis Antetokounmpo many months ago back in March, but now that I've done a little more research and watch more of him playing, more highlight videos of him playing, it's like, yeah, I think he's like I think his ceiling is somewhere like pretty fun role player, maybe even like very good starter type of guy. For Kevin O'Connor's second round picks, 2 guys who played professionally in Australia. Trenton Flowers, who's like a big 6'6", 6'7", 200-pound wing, kind of guard forwardy type. Has some skills to maybe be, from what I understand from reading O'Connor's scouting reports, some skills to be an on-ball offensive creator, but has sort of a long way to go in that area and isn't much of like an off the dribble shooter just yet. And then at 40, AJ Johnson, who guest on the program last week, Tyler Metcalf said was one of his favorite players in the draft and thinks he has first round talent. And while Johnson is probably not ready to play in the NBA next season, it might even be 2 seasons away from being an NBA contributor because he's just so slight of frame, so that he's really talented. He had a really nice NBA combine, and even with an underwhelming year playing in Australia as like a 6'5" combo guard with a slight frame, who could turn into like a really interesting NBA 2 guard, and maybe more if he can play, get big enough to play up and play a little bit of some small forward at that size, or at least get away with some minutes as a backup small forward a little bit. But he profiles more as a 2, as a combo guard. I like those picks at 34 and 40. Guys who are not yet 20, upside wings upside wings who've played a little bit of professional basketball. I like the idea. I don't love them. Like I don't know enough about Trent Flowers, and AJ Johnson I'm sort of just becoming familiar with. But I like those picks. I think in the second round, you want to mostly go upside, and particularly for the Blazers because of their roster crunch. If you go upside and guys that would maybe sign a 2-way deal and then sign a real NBA contract either later in the season or beyond that, like I think that could be a good deal for everyone involved. Over at Yahoo Sports, former guest on the program, Kristen Peak, has also a 2-round mock. I'll share the first couple picks with you here, then we'll talk second rounders in the second segment because we're running a little long here. But Cody Williams from Colorado at 7 and Keyshawn George at 14. Cody Williams, I feel like I've really waffled on, and I'm going to make you a promise. Next week on Monday's show, coming into the weekend, I'm going to make my actual who I like picks. I'm going to nail it down who I like as we get into draft week. You probably don't need to. My opinion is not like super valuable here, but a bunch of listeners have asked, like, hey, Mike, who do you like? So I will share those picks, but I'm going to wait Monday's show of next week. Who the Blazers should draft in the lottery. That'll be coming next week. Cody Williams, I've been up and down on. He has like some defensive upside. He's big. He can get to the rim. Can he shoot? We don't know. Didn't shoot in high school, was a non-shooter in high school, and didn't take enough threes in college for us to have any idea of what he can do there. If he can shoot, he's a really intriguing prospect. If he can't shoot, he's just like, he's a really, what is his level of contribution if he's a non-shooter at the next level? I think that's a big thing. And he's slight right now, but guys get bigger and they'll fill out. I'm not really worried about his frame. He's big and he can handle the ball and get himself to the rim. It's for me, and I think he has some defensive versatility, like upside there. You look at the sort of the production, right? It's like he's going to be one of 3 guys from Colorado probably taking the draft, and he was the worst of the 3, and he'll be taking the highest because the NBA draft is weird. But like, you can see, if you look at him, you can see like, okay, you project 3 years down the line. Yeah, that could be a really intriguing player. But I think the shooting is such a big questionable swing skill because he's probably not an on-ball guy. And if you're an off-ball wing in the NBA and you can't shoot or don't shoot, you have a limited ceiling. The next one is at 14, Kristen Peak has the Blazers taking Keyshawn George from Miami. George, reportedly, according to ESPN's Jonathan Gavoni, has a green room invite, has been invited to attend the draft and sit on the floor, and like he's going to be on TV and stuff, which means the NBA thinks he is going early in the first round. And now it's even dicier to make those invites because if you do invite someone and they don't get drafted in the first round, it isn't like Ryan Rupert that just waits around for 3.5, 4 hours. They literally go home and have to come back the next day. And do they come back the next day? How does that even work? That's messy. It's not Bol who just like leaves for a little bit. He's like, I'm out of here. I've been in here too long. So the NBA's probably got relatively good intel from George and his people. He's a guy who had a late growth spurt. I like late growth spurt players. It's like he came up with some guard skills and now he shot up to 6'7". He can shoot. He's a little bit theoretical because of a relatively limited production, but a wing who can create and shoot a little bit is like really interesting. He's what the Blazers need. Like they need a wing. They need a guy who's 6'7" and above who can dribble and go get his own offense, who isn't, Jeremy Grant, because they need someone sort of more on their timeline. And George could be that. Okay, I went a little long on those picks. A couple more from Kristen Peak, and then I want to talk NBA free agents in the second segment, plus what are the Atlanta Hawks doing? Join me in that second segment, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals may be over, but summer means that there's baseball every day. Baseball every day. There's a lot of games every day. It is the beauty and the burden of baseball is that they're out there playing every day except for like Thursdays and Mondays. But even some of those, they'll be out there playing. And right now, new customers who are following all of that baseball action get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet on FanDuel. That's $200 you use to bet on everything to who's hitting homers, how many strikeouts will happen in the first 5 innings, or Nerfies if you're really into it. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and I usually do that later in the show, but we're doing it here anyways. Welcome back to the second segment. Let's talk Kristen Peak's 2 picks in the second round because I think they're both intriguing. 34 Peak has the Blazers taking Kevin McCullough, who's like a big, wingy guard from forward in my mind, but wing from Kansas. I like McCullough as a second round flyer. He's a junior. He's a little bit older. He's ancient by NBA draft standards, but I don't think that's that big of a deal in the second round. I don't even think it's that big of a deal for the Blazers, period. It's just like you wouldn't want to draft all 23-year-olds. If you came away from a draft with like everyone who is sort of closer to their finished product, that would be a problem. But like drafting a couple guys who are a little bit older and can maybe give you something earlier on is useful. McCullough is like skilled enough and was productive enough in college to think that he can be productive in the pros. He can handle, shoot a little bit, but he's... Yeah, like I like him as a second round flyer. I didn't see a ton of Kansas this year, so I don't have like a super nuanced view of him. But I think like talented, do everything 6'6", 6'7" wing is, if if it all pops, he's an NBA player. If it doesn't, he's a guy who's just not quite good enough in any one thing to make the league. And at 40, the Christian Peaks draft has the Blazers taking Adem Bona. I gotta say, I like the Yahoo draft. 3 wings, 2 like strong upside plays in Cody Williams and Keyshawn George, a closer to, and like a guy who spent more time in college, and Kevin McCullough, who might be like, maybe not plug and play. I think that's like a stupid term to use with someone you draft in the second round. Like if they were plug and play, they wouldn't be available at 34, but like maybe impactful a little earlier, because closer to what they're going to be as a player. And then Adem Bona, who's like high energy, rim running, shot blocking big who plays his butt off and already worked out for the Blazers. I like Bona a lot. At 40, I think that's a really intriguing pick. I like that Yahoo draft. I don't know if that's it for me, but it's close to it. Speaking of, I mentioned this in the first segment, but I want to tease it out here. The Atlanta Hawks have the first pick, and it's been reported that they're considering drafting maybe Donovan Clingan, and in both the Ringer draft and as well as Yahoo draft, and this fall is what ESPN has had for a long time, Zachary Rees-Haché is going 1 overall, and Sarr would slip to 2 or 2 and beyond. Alexander Sarr would not go 1, but at his pre-draft media availability today, Landry Fields, who runs the GM for the Hawks, runs the Atlanta's front office along with Kyle Korver. Fields told assembled media there today that the Hawks right now they plan on keeping the number 1 overall pick. I think that is a very interesting note to keep in the back of your mind. One, it's not reporting sources, smokescreen stuff. And this time of year, there's a lot of stuff. It's lying season. I say it all the time on the show. It's lying season for heading into the draft. But Landry Fields saying that on like at the lectern, talking to assembled media, that's like he's either out and out lying in his lying season, or it's just like an NBA guy telling you the truth. We got the number 1 overall pick. We are in a weird spot as a franchise. There isn't a lot of value in trading this pick because no one in this draft, no one's going to give you the haul to move up to 1. It's relatively light to move up and it's relatively light to move back. So like probably the best course of action is take the player you want at 1. That means that they're probably 1 and 2 aren't available. Washington's probably going to make their pick. I guess conceivably they could trade back a little bit and get multiple picks, but like they're bad enough and early enough in their rebuild that they just like take Alex Sarr and move forward. Like easy peasy. Or, Clingan or Rees-Haché or whatever. Nikola Topic, Matis Pizzelos, who knows? That means like the first real pick that is going to be actively dangled is the Houston Rockets. That gives the Rockets a little juice. That gives them a little juice. I think that allows Houston, if Atlanta's really not going to be involved in the trade market with 1, it allows Houston to say this is the best pick that's available in the draft. And if the Blazers, who have been rumored to be at least interested in acquiring a second top 10 pick, or interested in moving up in the draft from a couple different media outlets who have reported that, like that would mean that I think it's very unlikely the Blazers have the assets to move up to 1 period, but that means that the Blazers, moreover, it means that other teams are going to be more competitive. If Atlanta's not even considering it, other teams are going to be more competitive in that chase for 3, which might price out the Blazers, or it might just be the reality. And maybe Portland says, okay, we'll call Charlotte. We don't care. Like we'll call Detroit. We don't care. Like it'll be, we'll just go another route. But I think that it's telling that Atlanta is at this moment, when Landry Fields spoke to the media on Monday, 10 days before the draft, said like, no, we're going to keep 1. Our plan is to keep the top pick. I think that is notable and important for sort of mapping out what happens next. And much more concrete than the sort of other lying season stuff. The NBA Finals ended today. I'll offer some thoughts on the Celtics to close the show, but I think free agency started because the NBA has changed the way free agency works, and now teams are allowed to negotiate with their own free agents. And the Blazers don't even, like, the only player they have entering free agency is Moses Brown. They're not going to re-sign him. That's a non-factor. But what other teams do with the major unrestricted free agents, whether those teams stay with their incumbent team or test the market, will have a serious impact on where the Blazers head, like what they do from here. Let's talk about what that might look like and some names to watch as NBA free agency begins on freaking June 18th. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And they got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, so you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers, and we're introducing ourselves in both segments, 2 and 3, today's show, because I screwed up too. Okay, so the NBA started free agency today. Who knows? Okay, real quick on this. It's really, I understand that people love transaction season. I host a podcast. I know what y'all download. I know what y'all listen to. I know what you watch on YouTube. You love trades and all this nonsense. But the part of basketball I really enjoy is basketball. I don't dislike NBA free agency. I don't dislike the trade machine. I kind of like the logic of team building a lot. I think it's really fascinating, like how teams get better and build. And we'll talk about the Celtics here in a moment to close the show. But like, can't we let it breathe? 24 hours? We're talking a few hours after the Celtics win the championship. We've moved on to free agency. Now, it's not real free agency. Real free agency is not going to start till June 30th when the moratorium begins and teams can negotiate with any free agents. And then you can actually make these signings official on July 6th. And then we'll head into Summer League, and bing, bang, boom, the NBA offseason will be in full swing. But instead, now we have 12 days where teams can negotiate with their own free agents. And that means players that were on the roster at the end of last season can negotiate with their teams. I think the NBA is doing this for two reasons. One, they know you sickos need more transaction news. And Adam Silver said on the record that he wishes that fans cared more about the games than transactions, but he's an idiot and doesn't know how to make teams make you care about the games more than transactions. So it's just like, well, the other way to do it is make transactions the whole freaking game. And the sort of implicit message is the games don't even matter, not the freaking NBA finals, because things you can look forward to. But I also get that, like, the Blazers haven't played a basketball game since the second week of April, and you're just itching for news. Now, the Blazers aren't going to do anything. Again, they don't have free agents to re-sign, but other teams do. And if you can negotiate with with incumbent free agents, to players that are already on your team, those negotiations, or lack thereof, could have an impact for the Blazers. There are good teams that have cap space this summer. It is a weird summer in which a team like Philly, which has championship aspirations, Oklahoma City, which has championship aspirations, Orlando, a team that wants to, be good, Utah, a team that refuses to be bad, are four of the top five teams with the most cap space. Shout out to Detroit, who just has a lot of cap space. They are famously not good. But if this means that there are going to be teams that are going to be able to absorb big money contracts. And in a free agent class that is not particularly appealing, the top of the class either deciding to stay with their incumbent team or not reaching an agreement and hitting unrestricted free agency, or opting out and hitting free agency, that will be telling and could possibly take some of the Blazers' trade partners off the market. So some names to watch: Paul George, who has been linked to the Philadelphia 76ers. He can opt in and extend. He has a player option, or he can opt out and re-sign. But if he opts out and re-signs, he ends up with a deal that is relatively comparable to what he could get on the open market based on the rules. And if the Clippers wanted to offer him that type of contract, he would already have that. He would have it. It wouldn't be a thing. He wouldn't be sitting here in a curious situation, right? They want to pay him less. That's their plan. They don't want to pay him the absolute max. Philly could max him. They have space to do so. So if Paul George does not reach an agreement one way or another with the Clippers over the next 10 days, that's a name to watch, because Philly, if they strike out on these guys, they could be a team that comes calling for the Jeremy Grants of the world and Malcolm Brogdons and what have you, because like they are going to be a team that is basically empty. Roster is entirely empty, and if they aren't a player in free agency, and there's not a lot of names at the very top of the list that are likely to switch teams, like Pascal Siakam and James Harden in Indiana and LA, all of the reports suggest that they're going to be back with their incumbent team. So it's like you're really talking about Paul George with Philly, and if Philly does land Paul George, they're probably not they're just not going to be in the same level of. They're not going to have the cap space to naturally absorb someone like Jeremy Grant, and they're probably not going to have the incentive to do so, and they will have already renounced all of their players, so it's hard to trade those things. The other name to watch is Klay Thompson. This is a big one. The Athletic reported that there is mutual interest between Klay Thompson and the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic have long been rumored as a destination for potentially Anthony Simons, even here on the show. And that's not rumored on the show, it's just speculated. I think that's probably the better word, speculated as a destination for Anthony Simons. I think there are reasonable option to also pursue Malcolm Brogdon, right? Maybe cheaper to acquire, still fit some of their needs as a shooter and a ball handler and all of those things. But like they could be a natural trade partner with the Blazers. But if they sign Klay Thompson, they're probably out of that. And if they sign Klay Thompson, that puts the Blazers in a situation where it's like, well, what's going on with Chris Paul and the Warriors? And then you kind of change where your eyes are, right? You, instead of South Florida, you maybe move to other places. I think another name to watch is Malik Monk, unrestricted free agent with the Kings. He can probably make, I believe based on the way the CBA rules work, he can just make more money. He would have to take a little bit less money to sign with the Kings. I think the max the Kings can offer him is like $17.5 million based on my reading. And like, he might make 20 plus $25 million like in the new sort of CBA climate. I think, Malik Monk was a finalist for Sixth Man of the Year. He is a bucket off the bench. I think he can start in the right situation. I think he would be specifically helpful to the Magic if they need a shooter who could shoot, and like a shooter who could score, a shooter who could score in bunches in a variety of ways. The Kings would turn their offense over to Monk sometimes late in games and just like kind of let him cook. The Magic could use that, and if you can just sign someone using your cap space and not trade assets to the Blazers, it's more appealing probably to go that route for the Magic. So I would say names to watch if you're the Blazers and hoping that they can get in on the trade market here in the future is Paul George, Klay Thompson, and Malik Monk. I guess there's a world in whatever DeMar DeRozan decides to do with Chicago. It puts Chicago in a sort of selling. They become sellers, right? They might they seem unlikely to hit a true rebuild because they're just a weird franchise. But like that would be, I think that's not like specifically as a trade partner, but as like a player, as another player on the board. If DeMar DeRozan were to walk, like I mentioned, at the other names at the very top of the free agent list to watch is like Pascal Siakam and James Harden. But all the reporting suggests that, particularly from Mark Stein of the Stein line, that Siakam is going to sign a fat deal with the Pacers. That's all going to happen maybe as soon as Tuesday. It could happen as soon as Tuesday. It might. This is the first time it's ever been like this. The other reason that the NBA probably changed the rules, and I'm bearing this after my angry rant at the top, so some of you have probably already said, this guy's an idiot. And that's true. I am kind of an idiot, but I'm your idiot, dang it. Is that the teams were already negotiating with their own free agents, and this cuts out the tampering. This allows you to say, okay, we can formally meet with Pascal's people, as opposed to just back channeling, and then like the moment you can announce it, okay, Pascal Siakam has agreed to a max deal to remain a Pacer, whatever. I think it's in the afternoon now, so it's like noon on June 30th. It's like immediately they've agreed. Now that you can just remove the tampering remove, and it's not tampering with your own free agents, but it does make it a little bit weird because you've probably already agreed to those deals. You can just announce it. None of them become official until July 6th. It's just now you can have formal on the books negotiations, above board, all of those things. And I think this rule kind of changes some of that tampering stuff that the league like pretends to care about, but they don't. They just like take draft picks away from teams, which doesn't make any sense. Okay, a thought on the Boston Celtics, a very good basketball team that played a very boring NBA Finals because they were a very good basketball team. I think, I mentioned I did a like lessons from the playoffs earlier during the playoffs, and for the Celtics, it was just to keep keep going for it no matter how good you are. I'm reminded of the 2016 film Pop Star with Andy Samberg, and the tagline of Pop Star is never stop, never stopping, and that's what the Celtics did. They just kept getting better. They were a team that had a championship window, right? They were in the finals in 2022. They were in a Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last season, and then they said, okay, Marcus Smart, see you later. Malcolm Brogdon, 6th Man of the Year, see you later. Rob Williams, see you later. They acquired Drew Holiday for maybe a fair price, maybe a real sweetheart deal, depending on who you ask. To me, I think it's fine. I think the problem was not flipping Brogdon and Williams after that. I think it was still having them on the roster in going forward. Whoops. And they added Derek White at some point for the Josh Richardson trade. You get Kristaps Porzingis, you get Drew Holiday, you added to a core that has recently added Derek White. Like, the Blazers are a long way from being this, but I think the lesson from like a team as good as the Celtics, that is, even if you have players as good as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who will keep you in a sort of the inner circle of contenders, or at least the sort of wider circle of like, hey, these 6 teams could probably win the title if everything works out for them every year with those 2 dudes, is that to get in there and to be as like into the inner circle and into the like the place where you can just say, okay, we're not just a team that can win a title, we're a team that should win the title because we're so good, is that you just have to keep cashing it in. I'll miss the NBA playoffs. I love them. It's the best time of year. The finals were a little bit boring, but I will miss basketball, or at least NBA basketball, while it's gone. I'll find ways to watch other basketball games. Don't you worry about me. I got WNBA League Pass. It's relatively affordable. But like, I think the lesson for, if you're like trying to say like, how can the Blazers do that? Nail draft picks, absolutely nail draft picks. You draft the Jays in back-to-back drafts at 3, no doubt. And you get them in, you freaking clean up in 2016 and 2017. And then you keep your window open as long as you can. You keep churning, you keep upgrading. You don't say this team is good enough, let's run it back. Even if you're excellent, you say we have to take the risk to get better. That's sort of the lesson for me from the Celtics, and the same thing with the Mavs. They were not good enough. They made trades at the deadline to get better, and then you have superstar talent that got you there. And Luka was an absolute superstar, like he is in the playoffs. And then at the very highest level against the best team in the league, it's like, oh yeah, this is a level he can't hang at. Like, he can't defend this type of offense, or like he's also hurt. Both of those things to be true. He was excellent in the playoffs. That's your lessons from the NBA Finals. Buried here at the end of the show. Come back for tomorrow's program. That's what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.